The Minister for Higher Education, Dr. Nzimande, yesterday announced that it would be up to universities to decide how much fees go up by in 2017, as long as the increases do not exceed 8%. The minister's statement comes during the ongoing student protests at various universities across the country in the continued call for free higher education. The Commission of Inquiry set up by the President to assess the feasibility of free higher education is expected to make its final report back by mid-next year. And there are suggestions already of an overall means-based incremental fee increase system, and this has been put forward by some Vice Chancellors. The CEO of the Universities of South Africa, Professor Ahmed Bawa, joins us to discuss the Minister's resolution on how the different universities can implement such an increase whilst managing the real threat of yet another national shutdown. And Professor Bawa, pleasure to have you with us.
Nice to meet you, and thank you for having me.
Just to get it right, it's Universities of South Africa Forum, is that?
No, it's Universities South Africa.
Universities South Africa, okay.
It's the umbrella structure of the 26 public universities.
That's right. So you work on behalf of them as a body.
As a collective, yes.
Now, the minister talks about 8% increase that they will be allowed, as long as it does not exceed that. But I can imagine not all universities need 8%. Others probably need much more than that because their level of development and infrastructure needs and a whole number of challenges that they face would require much more money than an 8% fee increase.
That's correct. And in fact, one of the new additional cost structures in the universities is the insourcing process, which has resulted in a very significant increase in expenditure. But having said that, what we've done is over a number of meetings, the Vice Chancellors have met and discussed over many hours. And we've decided that we'll act in unison for the 2017 discussion about fees.
Okay.
So, in fact, we have a single position for this year with regard to fees for 2017.
What is the position for this year? Because the 8% fees that should not exceed 8% is for next year.
No,
what happens
I meant for next year.
Remember, agreed, but I'm saying what happens now in 2016?
No, the 2016 year, remember, was a fee-free year.
Yes.
Not fee-free, sorry. There was no fee increment.
Yes.
What happened then was that the state stepped in and said that it would subsidize the universities to the extent of the gap, if you like. Now, the subsidization wasn't the full amount. It was approximately 60 or 70% of the full amount. And then the universities had to find the rest of the money.
From their own budgets and reallocations.
Correct. So money that would have gone to the libraries or to maintenance were now rechanneled.
Yes. Well, it's money that we're talking about, but there are implications of all of these things, right? That the increases are not just for nice things.
Correct.
If you don't increase fees, or you don't, like this year, there were no fee increases and you are allowed only 8%. The implications, what would they be, in a typical university setting? Because when you reallocate, you take money from somewhere to somewhere. Just give me a sense of what happens.
So let me just say that had the fee increase for 2017 been 6%, say attached to the CPI, instead of 8%, our calculations indicate that about 16 of our 26 universities would have run into the red. What that would have meant, basically, was that they would have entered retrenchments, huge cuts to library budgets, huge cuts to maintenance, huge cuts to the way in which we run our residences, and so on. So, the 8%, by the way, is not a thumbsuck. It really comes from what we call the higher education price index. And basically what we do is we take the cost structures of the university, the cost drivers at least, and we measure them year by year. And we say, well, how does that basket of cost drivers, how does it kind of change year by year? And that comes out to be about 1.7% higher than CPI.
Okay. Now let's look at the broader call is that higher education should be made available for free, especially university education in South Africa. And there are other sectors of higher education anyway, the TVETs, now I think they're called, and then the adult education centers. So who gets the most of the money? You know, is it universities? Is it the further education and training colleges? Where does the money go?
If you take the budget that goes to the Department of Higher Education and Training,
Yeah.
not basic education,
Yes.
the universities receive by far the biggest chunk of money. And that's a real problem, because the one sector that we want to develop, it's critical to develop, is the TVET sector, for example.
Yes.
And constantly that sector is seriously underfunded. And that is an issue, actually. So I think the story is that, not just within higher education, but even within all sectors of society, there's gross underfunding in many areas. So there's huge competition for resources.
I think let's stay with that point for a moment, for perspective. The people, young people who make it to university would be those who have obtained passes in matric, right? Correct. University entrance. And they represent, what, 20% of those who would have gone through the
pipeline,
the basic education system. Yeah. And then you are left with the 80% who would not have necessarily passed matric to qualify for university, but who do need to develop skills anyway. Correct. And then the further education or the TVET colleges accommodate those ones, right? And including the ones who want to go into the trades, the artisans and so on.
That's great.
So now, if I understand you correctly, the funding is going to the top 20% would have passed, and anyway, it's not all the top 20, but those who would have been admitted to universities.
Correct.
And the rest of the young people who've gone through the education system then get excluded or underfunded. Is that what's going on?
That is what's going on, I'm afraid. And you're right about the 20%. It's, the participation rate in South Africa is close on 20% of 18 to 24-year-olds in higher education.
Yes.
And of course, that doesn't speak then to the rest of the students who are coming through the pipeline.
Yes.
And that's correct, yes.
And I'm asking the question because it's got implications for the country. It means a majority of young people who would never go to university, who should be going to the further education, are not receiving any support for them to acquire the necessary skills and to become employable with a higher unemployment rate anyway amongst young people.
To be fair, I mean, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme now does actually work in the TVET sector.
Yeah.
But there's no question about the fact that sector is grossly underfunded.
So let's go back to the question of free education. Is it possible in South Africa for now to provide free education?
Yeah. See, my starting point, and it's a proposal that we've made to the Presidential Commission, is that there are two possibilities. The one is that we stay with a fee-based system and find a way of working very closely, paying a lot of attention to the needs of the poor and the missing middle, and to find a way of dealing with that.
Right.
So the principle has to be that if there's a young person...
And this is in the university context, right?
Yeah, university. Yeah. So if there's a young person who qualifies to be at university, that person should not be prevented from studying for financial reasons.
Yes.
So we must find a way of dealing with
that.
Okay, so that's the one option. Second option is set aside the fees, and then you can't just have a financial hole. What you have to do is then raise the money through other means. So one can imagine, for example, that then you'd have something like a graduate tax,
yes,
which will generate income, which would take the place of the fees, if you like. Those are the only options that are available. There's no other. Now,
I understand where you receive free education, but you're going to pay additional tax.
Correct.
That actually sounds fair.
And of course, the philosophy behind that is that higher education produces two kinds of goods. It provides public goods, which is the stuff that all societies need: doctors, lawyers, teachers, but also, producing young people who can be active in democracy and so on. And then it produces private goods. So young people who graduate from university generally have better jobs. They have a better.
But they might leave the country. See, there's an argument that you train them, but then they leave.
Yes, but we also attract people from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So I think that we must be clear that that some people might leave. Yes, that's true, but we also attract people from other parts of the world, and we should think about this movement as something that is is a fluid. There's a fluidity about it.
I think we have to have a debate on that at some future time, so that we expand on that, because the issues are many and complex. I want to stay a little bit with the issue of the missing middle, because they don't qualify for the NSFAS funding, and yet their families cannot afford to keep them in the universities. So where's the solution now?
Well, I'm sure you've heard about the big project which was initiated by the minister, Nzimande, in which he asked Sizwe Nkosana, the former CEO of Rand Merchant Bank, to look at the possibility of creating kind of a newly formulated NSFAS, if you like, which has two parts to it. The first part deals with those young people that come from very poor families. So it'll function very much like it does at the moment for those students. Those students will get grants. The idea is that they will be grants, not loans, and that they will receive those grants for 3 years. And hopefully, in that time, they will graduate and so on. Then the idea was that for the missing middle, so those students who come from families where, for example, the earning is between 120,000 a year and 600,000 a year, that there will be a loan system in place, a mixture of loan and grant system, depending on where they are in that scheme, in that spectrum, if you like. So for those students, there would be a mixture of loan and grant. If they close to the 120,000, it'll be mostly grants. If they're close to the 600,000, it'll be mostly loans. Now, the interesting thing is that for the first time, there's a proposal that this will be a mixture between a public-private.
Yes.
It'll be a public-private operation. And that's something which is completely unique. It hasn't happened before.
Yes.
And we're very hopeful, in fact. In fact, it's a meeting I'm going to immediately after this one.
Sure.
We are very hopeful, in fact, that by the end of, by 2018, that program will be in place.
Let's deal with the immediate issues now. The students on some campuses are not happy with the fact that the minister has made the proposal of an 8% fee increase. How is that going to be managed? Because it's there, it's been announced, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think we have to have a continuing engagement with those particular students. I mean, the big question for me is, I fail to understand, to be honest, just exactly what their argument is. Let me just put it to you in this way. For this year, at least, remembering that we are in an interregnum, right? Because there's a presidential commission and several other projects underway. This is just an interim solution. And the idea for this year was really to try and ensure that the poor students from poor families that are admitted to university can study on the basis of their NSFAS grants. For the missing middle, what the minister's statement says is we'll give those young people some relief by covering the 8% increase. So basically, the fee that they'll be paying was the fee of 2015.
Yes.
Not 2016, 2015.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because this was also a fee-free year.
Okay. Yeah. Now, there's another idea that's been put on the table, and that's that the increases for students from wealthier families should pay more than the proposed increase of 8%, in a way to subsidize the poorer students. Yeah. Has that been well received?
Well, I don't know if that will be well received. I mean, I think there'll be some reaction to that. But again, I mean, I think we have to just be quite careful to understand that will affect a certain number of universities. It's very unlikely to affect University of Fort Hare or Venda or Sisulu University and so on.
And I can imagine, sorry for this, that it might even create a bias of admission to those universities. You see, where the universities would say, we prefer children from wealthier families because those are going to pay anyway.
There is that danger. I mean, I think our Vice Chancellors would resist that temptation, but I think that is a danger. In fact, if you look at Makerere University in Uganda. They tried something like that,
Yeah.
and it had disastrous impacts, actually. But I wanted to come back to something else, and that is what I don't understand about the current campaign is that, essentially what we are saying is that there'll be families who are happy to pay between 100,000 and 200,000 rand a year to have their children in a basic education, in primary or secondary education. And then when those young people come to university, we say, okay, no, don't worry,
Yes.
you don't have to pay fees.
Yeah. Yeah.
In an unequal society like ours, there's something not quite right with that argument.
Well, education, very complex and vexed in the South African context. Where do you provide free education? At university level or basic education level? What happens to the TVET colleges? What happens to the 80% plus of matriculants who do not progress to universities? How do we provide them with skills? How do you provide them with employment? Who gets to pay? Who does not get to pay? Who must be taxed and who shouldn't be taxed? Professor Bawa, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you. It's just interesting
Well,
to me.
I want to hear your thoughts on this, all right? Professor Bawa says, what if we provided free education and then the graduates paid a graduate's tax that subsidizes higher education? Is this something that you would support, that get free higher education, but then you pay additional tax for the privilege of having gone through university? Write to us at tonight at Tim Modise. Oh, let me say that right. Tonight at modise.tv. Tonight at modise.tv. Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.